what is the right land? And the truth is, you won't think, is that brownfield or greenfield, because you might not recognise actually what was previously developed, and therefore brownfield, and what is greenfield and looking pretty scrubby. You will determine what is the right land to release in your area, and you will make that happen. And the intention is to multiply that through the country.
This is a good example, actually, that when you get localism right down to the villages, villages will very often vote in favour of growth because they want a few houses, because they know that their localism demands that they have some more houses, and then the district council, because of other pressures, will vote against it, and therefore the fact that it is going down to that level, and particularly if you're able to build as under the rules that it will be possible for you to be able to have some preference to people who need housing locally. I do think the localism is a crucial part. I don't see why we can't have a system under the proposal, which we will have under the proposals, which enable you to build specifically for localism, and you'll get a number of local landowners who are perfectly prepared to sell or give land at a very low price, if what is then going to happen is that you enhance the community. But if all it means is that you provide homes which in the end are for people entirely outside, not part of the community at all, and the second home phenomenon, which in our kind of area is very difficult indeed, then of course they won't make those offerings, and that's one of the things I hope the localism bill will bring out.
As part of localism, would any of you or all of you think that communities in particular areas where outsiders, arguably with greater financial resources, are routinely moving in, would you advocate local authorities, councils, being given the right and the power to impose local measures to stop second homism?
Well, I mean, I quite favour more powers at the parish and neighbourhood level, and one of those powers could be to restrict at least under-inhabited homes. I think there's another part of this which you raise. I mean, I've always been quite keen on the self-build options, particularly for young people. Self-build a home, much lower cost, learn some skills while you're doing it. You can do it now in a way which means much lower water and electricity charges and so on. But often, in fact, it's the next generation up of all kinds who make that difficult in planning terms. And of course, as with all of these discussions, if you don't have access to capital, even the quite small sums of capital, then it's not much use having the planning permission. So these things intersect. I wonder if I might just ask a provocative question though here, because I don't know the details of the Suffolk-Ipswich situation, but if either real or indicative numbers are imposed on you, which can only be achieved by building on greenfield, what would you as a community be willing to offer to Ipswich for them to take that burden off you? I mean, if we do enter a period of more multilateral negotiation, what would you be willing to offer?
I mean, I think you need a bigger area. Currently,
just wait for the mic, and we'd like to hear the answer. Go on.
Sorry. Our actual rented area is now actually spread over an area called Haven Gateway, which goes all the way into Essex, goes all the way up. Sorry, it is actually probably 750,000 people. But our particular community has difficulties in not enough land. So what you really perhaps need to be taking, the district council level actually restricts development of schemes because they are within a very small geographical area. So what you really perhaps should be looking at is where is it more appropriate to build housing because of brownfield infrastructure now that they've delivered at the cheapest price. We don't do that. We come at it the wrong way around, in my view. We should be looking at where are the assets, how can we develop them, and develop them there. What we've been told on the RSS was you've got to deliver 7,500 houses somewhere in your small district, and it's been a very great difficulty for our district council.
Yeah. Just think about the incentives, and don't forget that local authorities can plan together. Nothing says you have to.
But I'm told your housing bonus will only run for 3 years, and currently the market is in such a dreadful state.
The housing bonus gives you 6 years worth of housing benefit, matching the property over a 6-year period. It's determined by each spending review, so I can tell you it runs for 4 years minimum. Starts on the 1st of April.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there because there are lots of hands up, so we need to get around the room. So you've been patient at the back with your hand up. We'll get a microphone to you. It's on its way. Yeah, there we go.
Hi. Thank you. I've got an urban example from where I live, which the sort of tensions between local people, communities, and let's say more innovative solutions on the one hand, and then developers and very traditional sort of models of development on the other, where, for instance, greenfield site being looked at for a large football stadium, and yet there's a brownfield site that was set aside for an arena next to public transport that's not being used by the developer, but the developer is blackmailing the authority, arguably, by saying, well, you know, take it all and a load of new housing. We're not going to go where the site was set aside for an arena. And similarly, we got clarification from the government on the issue of what the local community could do in relation to a very, very powerful retailer wanting to develop in an area where literally thousands of people didn't want the retailer to drive the independent shops out. And the word from the government was, localism is to let the community work with the developer, not come up with its own solutions, but work with the developer. So there's that incredible tension. And property owners who've left buildings derelict for years, the local authority, too frightened of compulsory purchase perhaps, to actually let something else useful come in place of blight, where there's empty housing, empty offices, empty buildings for decades on end.
Yeah, well, thanks for the... Go on, Blair.
Yeah, but I think there's going to be a lot of frustration at the idea that we're going to have all these community organisers and we're going to have all this big society stuff, but when it comes to it, town after town after town can't keep Tesco out of their high street. And it's quite a simple thing. I mean, Ilkley, it was the other day, a huge campaign going on for a very long time. Everybody signed up to it. Still, they couldn't win their case. They think their high street will be destroyed. And it seems to me that real power of that kind really does have to be devolved, and referendums or whatever.
But that's the point. I mean, in a way, the danger with your argument, in which you emphasise the potential dangers as you see it of localism, are somewhat couched on the idea that a lot of local people are apathetic, disengaged. Your sort of your totemic meeting where only two men and their dog turn up. Maybe you're just philosophically inclined to be too pessimistic about people's willingness to engage, to learn about the issues and to take an informed decision.
But what gets them going, which Cameron will find too, is against things that are happening on the whole. It's much harder to get people to say, let's all get together and think of some creative thing to do here. What can we do to improve this? Give them a Tesco, or a taking away of their local police station, or a shutting down of their library. And what are these community organisers going to be? They're going to be fighting the cuts every step of the way, trying to hold on to what they've got, which is reasonable enough. That's what really gets people going. It takes much harder community organising to get people to think proactively, constructively, and what they want next. But just at the moment, just holding on to what you've got is desperately essential.
Yeah. But the other thing is you do get very, very different views. I mean, I was opposed to the building of a supermarket in one small town in my former constituency, and one got quite a lot of support for that. But actually, when you went round the doorsteps, there was very significant support for that supermarket. Now, all I'm saying
maybe
is,
local
but all the noise was the other way, and therefore, although I am wholly opposed to referenda on a national basis on any grounds at all, seems to me that local referenda, where you do have a relatively small community that actually does make that sort of decision, is a very sensible way forward.
Yeah, I can see the merits, but I can also see it could lead to sort of incredibly time-consuming and somewhat chaotic, planning processes where you've got to wait for convoluted decisions, and the vote's so close you've got to have a recount, and I don't know, couldn't it get awfully...
Well, that's why you focus on the plan, and the community voice needs to be heard in the plan making rather than trying to do it on the individual application. I think that's right.
Okay, let's try and squeeze a couple more in before we all have to go. So there's two gentlemen very patient with hands up. Let's try one then the other. I'll tell you what, let's take 3 or 4 comments, and we'll try and retain them, and then we'll deal with them quickly at the end. So you, sir, first, and then we'll move on.
Ben Davis from Coastal Housing down in Swansea. Is there a danger, does the panel think, that the localism agenda will skew participation in the decision-making process towards those with better resources and better knowledge of it.
Yeah, all right, good point. We'll address that. So, behind you next, give us your point or comment or question.
Hi, Dave from Sanford Housing Co. We house 150 people in London. We've got a biomass, solar thermal. We've completely retrofitted most of the technologies in this building with no government funding whatsoever, and rents are about half national average. I was wondering, asking Richard, what he thinks he's going to do to encourage the cooperative movement, and what is the status of the Conservative Cooperative Association at the moment?
I didn't know there was such a thing, Conservative Cooperative.
I always wanted to stand cooperative. I never understood why I couldn't do that.
Right, look, we've got a lady over here. And then one more lady here, and then we'll have to cease floor comment and get some quick reactions.
Thank you. It's been one of the themes of particularly John Gummer, I think, that we shouldn't be using brownfield sites. You shouldn't be using greenfield sites until we've used up brownfield sites. But of course, any developer will tell you that a brownfield site takes a lot of cleaning up, and in order for it to be a level playing field, equally attractive, someone's got to pay for those clean-up costs. Where's that money to come from? The other point I want to make is, if a community under localism were to agree with a local farmer that a certain field or white zoned land should be made over to housing, and the planning use should be changed, what is to stop that farmer from selling it off then to the highest bidder and making a clean windfall?
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that. We'll just very briefly take one more comment, and then John's going to answer those 2 points, and then John has to scarper, and we'll be following him soon after. But Madam, give us your point or question.
Yeah. Okay. I like localism if it's the good localism that was mentioned earlier, and I like radical change as well. But I fear that it will make things more unequal for many of the reasons that we've discussed, and probably picked up on that. I feel that Cameron's big society going along with localism would have a lot more credibility if he was as committed to narrowing the gap between different places, which was part of the previous government's policy, and I notice has kind of disappeared.
Yeah, although the previous government couldn't really claim a huge amount of success. But anyway, John has got to go. So the lady over there asked you specifically about brownfield sites. You seem to think all future development can take place and preserve our rolling green hills, but she points out there are problems with brownfield sites.
Well, there are, but they are much overstated by builders, because what they like to do is to do, well, we build 350 houses a year. I know a bit about building. I just tell you, I've written about it all my life. Just tell you, builders always tell you this because it is easier for them to do it, and they make a wider margin. That is perfectly true. But if there were no alternative to brownfield sites, you'd soon release all kinds of innovation which would happen. That's why I've always thought the system is bad. If 50% are brownfield and 50% are greenfield, what happens? They build on the greenfield and then say, we haven't got any more greenfield. That always happens. I do believe that you have to be tough in the capitalist system, and one of the people you've got to be very tough with are capitalists. As far as the farmer's field is concerned,
tell us about the farmer's field.
Yeah, but the farmer's field is quite simple. That under these rules, you will be able, in fact, to designate the land for a particular kind of housing, and you won't. Therefore, you can't just say, it's been designated for housing, therefore I can send the highest bidder. It will, in fact, be designated for social housing, or for local village housing, or for a local community housing. So you'll be able to overcome that, and I think that makes the big difference. My only last moment about the lady there. Look, it is no good saying good localism, because what you mean by that is localism I approve of, and that isn't localism at all. The truth of the matter is, trust the people. Let us have a go. Let's make sure it happens. And frankly, the last government had in its policy a narrowing of the gap. The gap widened faster under the last government than it had before.
That's not true.
Oh, it is true. It is true, Polly, unless you fiddle the figures. It's true. And the trouble is, I don't want to promise things.
And whether you blame...
I'd like to see your